In 1960, $20 went pretty far at the grocery store. By 1970, food prices had gone up nearly 27%, so your $20 didn't go quite so far. And this is what $20 buys today. Since 1960, food prices have jumped 230%. I'm Jane Eskind, and I'm running for the Senate because we can't afford to go on like this.
Jane Eskind, Democrat for the Senate, for Tennessee.
You know, federal spending is really getting out of control. People aren't going to stand for
the way we gave away the Panama Canal. That was downright criminal,
the price of food these days. There's not enough
jobs are what we need. I'd like to see
a senator who knows what's on people's minds. I'm Jane Eskind. A good senator has to be more than a good talker. In Tennessee, a good senator has to be a good listener.
Jane Eskind, Democrat for the Senate, for Tennessee.
Watered-down bill. Senator Baker, have the Democrats stolen the Republican thunder about tax relief for middle-income families and for business with this bill?
Mr. Clark, it may look that way, but I think by the time people have a chance to read this bill, they'll find something very different. For instance, after the House-Senate conference dropped the Republican initiative, that is the Roth-Kemp bill, or what we refer to as the son of Roth-Kemp in the Bellman-Nunn proposal, the net effect of this tax bill without that Republican initiative, and that's the way it was passed, will result in a tax increase for every family in America, every family of four that makes more than $8,000. When you take account of the inflation rate, the increase in Social Security taxes, and this new bill, there will be a positive dollar increase in the amount of taxes every family of four will have to pay that makes more than $8,000.
Well, if this bill is all this bad, would either of you advise President Carter to sign it and Congressman Rhodes?
Well, actually, I think he has to sign it. The facts are, as Senator Baker says, even with this bill, taxes are going up for the American people. And if you don't have a bill, then the temporary tax cuts that were given 2 years ago go off, and you actually have a statutory increase. So I think there's no doubt about his signing it. He certainly will. I'd like to mention one of the things which happened in the consideration of it, though. You know, in the House, we voted to instruct the conferees to accept the Senate amendment, the Nunn-Bellman amendment, which was the son of Kemp Roth. Many Democrats voted for it. Of course, as soon as the conferees got into their hot little room, they immediately forgot the whole thing. So the bill which came out has almost no resemblance to Kemp Roth. We assumed that the bill would come back to the House because we were the originating House. But instead of that, the House conferees connived in a cute little plot to have the Senate act on the bill first, so that we couldn't have a motion to recommit an identical vote to the vote which so many Democrats had ascribed before, because it would have made them look bad. It was a very cute piece of legerdemain which was only intended to fool the American people.
I wonder if people are a little confused about what we're talking about with all these names. We're talking about the amendment that would have cut taxes $142 billion over a 5-year period if, in fact, there had been certain triggers that were brought into play. But do you think the American people really today are interested so much in cutting taxes as they are in cutting spending, in more fiscal responsibility, the old Republican song that Bob Clark suggested the Democratic president may have preempted?
Can I answer that? John, if you don't mind, I think, Mr. Donaldson, that you've got a good point. I think we've got a Democratic president who's singing a Republican song in fiscal affairs. As a matter of fact, when a year and a half ago the Republicans in the Senate adopted a proposal calling for a tax cut and an expenditure reduction, I recall very clearly that the Carter White House labeled it as irresponsible. And I saw the president later, and I said, look, you know, we think this is the sort of thing that we need to have to get the government off people's backs and out of their hair. And the administration was adamantly opposed to it and instead suggested that we have a rebate, which I think was irresponsible. But later they came to the same proposal, that there ought to be a tax cut. But I reiterate, the tax cut
Along
that
with
this
tax reforms,
administration...
which you dropped.
No,
There's
which
not
we
a
did
single
not.
reform
No.
in this bill.
That's true, there is not. But I was about to say, in the Nunn-Bellman proposal, there were triggers that did, in fact, provide restraints on expenditure as well. The point of the matter is Republicans have tried now for a year and a half to reduce taxes and to reduce the level of spending. And it's been a Democratic Congress and a Democratic president that have prevented it. And we're not going to get a tax cut. This bill, to the contrary notwithstanding, the net effect will be to cost every American taxpayer who earns more than $8,000 more money instead of less.
Well, may I emphasize what Senator Baker just said, because I think it's very important. We have tried in the House and in the Senate to get a formula whereby revenues and expenditures were put together, were correlative. We had this in the son of Kemp Roth, the Nunn-Bellman bill. By junking that feature, I think that the administration and the Democrats in the Congress have junked one of the most important economic packages which has ever been brought forth in this country in many years.
Well, we want to talk more about Kemp Roth, but Senator Baker, you said we have a Democratic president singing a Republican song. I would think you would look, both of you, very happy. You have won a convert in the White House. But is this one of the great dangers facing the Republican Party?
Well, he may be singing the song, but he doesn't know the words. He's just humming it so far. And I think trying to put forth a fiscally conservative image without really going very much farther than the rhetoric.
Well, you say he doesn't know the words. Now, the Kemp Roth bill, which all Republicans, almost all, are espousing, it is formal campaign policy of the Republican Party, says nothing about spending cuts. Isn't that one of the weaknesses in your own big tax-cutting proposal?
Well, of course, the Republican legislative agenda, which the House Republicans put together, takes care of both sides.
The former chairman of the Federal Reserve said it was irresponsible and inflationary. Forbes magazine said it was putting the cart before the horse, that what we have to do is cut back on federal spending, cut back on the federal budget before we can cut back on federal income.
The main thrust of your campaign has been an anti-Howard Baker campaign. You have delineated every vote that he has made in the Senate, and those that you feel you would have made differently, you're talking about as you campaign across the state. Is that the main thrust, that Howard Baker has not been an effective senator?
No, I think the main thrust is a little bit different. If I could try to tell you what we have been trying to do in the campaign, is not to talk about every vote that he has made, but to talk about where he has been responsive to Tennessee and Tennesseans, and where he has not been responsive to us and to our needs in this state, where he has voted for consumers, where he hasn't voted for consumers, and we don't find many votes for consumers. We find a lot for big oil and big gas and the big multinationals, but not too many for consumers and people who are having trouble with their income and with dealing with this inflationary economy. And these are the kinds of things we're talking about. Who is responsive to the needs of the people of Tennessee? When he ran for office, he said, let me represent you. And we're trying to say he has not been representing Tennessee.
Some people are puzzled over the stand that you took on the Panama Canal issue. Those that knew you when you were behind the scenes in Democratic politics felt that your philosophy certainly would have been, as a senator, to vote for the ratification of the Panama Canal Treaty. You said you would not have voted for the ratification. Is that what you said?
That's exactly what I said, and of course people who would like to position me do so at peril of being told they were wrong on it. The issue is, again, representation, and whether or not a senator is going to represent the people he seeks to serve, or whether or not he's going to represent his own interests or some other interests. And I am concerned that the people of Tennessee felt betrayed by the vote on the treaties, not only the vote, but the leadership that Mr. Baker exercised in the Senate in getting those treaties passed instead of representing the people of Tennessee. And I would have done differently. I think he erred in his judgment.
You would have voted against the ratification?
That's right.
If you're a senator, will you vote to ratify the SALT treaty if it's presented as a treaty?
I think the SALT treaty is a life or death matter for all of us. I do think we must have de-escalation of nuclear warfare and nuclear warheads and nuclear arms race. And I do support the SALT treaties, and I think they are important. I think if we need to have leverage with the Soviet Union, we should do it on a different basis than on SALT.
All right. Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
We can go on.
So you will vote for the SALT treaty if
That's
it's presented as you know the terms right now?
That's right.
All right. There was an ad that appeared in the newspapers, I think this week, for your campaign. It shows a picture of the Senate dining room and a meal on the Senate dining room. I think the price is $4.95, something like that.
$4.40, I believe.
$4.40. A very elaborate, expertly prepared meal, and you say this is the way senators are eating while so many people are not eating this way. Now that's very true, but if you're a United States senator, would you go into the Senate dining room and say, we want to start serving beans or peanut butter sandwiches now instead of this expensive meal that we're eating?
No, but I think that, you know, if I am a senator, I'm going to get a good salary for my job. And I think I can afford to pay the full market value for a meal. And I think senators can and should. None of the rest of the people of Tennessee are having their lunches subsidized by the federal government or by the Senate budget. And I don't think that's fair. I really don't.
Being a senator is a pretty good job. You don't have to pay Social Security tax. You get a lot of things paid for you.
That's true, but I don't know that that's necessarily fair. You know, families in Tennessee are really having a hard time making it, and I'm concerned about them. I truly am. 80% of Tennesseans are spending 70% of their income on just for essentials. They're really being priced out of life, and for me to go up and take advantage of this kind of lavishness and glorious living and be unresponsive and unsympathetic to the problems that Tennessee consumers are having and Tennessee families are having. You know, we have so many problems that are causing families to have trouble just functioning and just making it. And I'm concerned about that, and I think it's incumbent upon the United States Senate and upon each senator to so conduct himself and so conduct the Senate so that they at least say, I know what's happening, I'm sympathetic, I'm concerned, I care, and I'm going to try to do something about it.
Can we take a few questions for you? Do you mind
Sure.
if we talk to these people? All right, let me switch mics here. We have a nice group here, and everybody's hoping that I won't walk over to them. So you lost your hope, so I'm going to walk over to you. Would you stand up, please? I just know that you have something on your mind.
Yes, I do. I would like to know Miss Eskind's thoughts behind the proposed new Senate building that's under construction.
Okay.
With the bathrooms for 2 per Senate.
Right, and all the elaborate decorations.
Right.
Yes.
I appreciate your asking the question. I'm concerned. But my concern is on many levels about the new Senate office building. First place, it's terribly extravagant. I think it's going to cost about $3 million per senator, and that's an awful lot of money. I don't need an office that costs me $3 million just for myself alone. The second problem is with the terrible cost overruns that we are having with governmental contracts across the board, not just with the Senate office building. You know that you can't go out and purchase something and not know what it's going to cost by the time it's completed or finished or delivered to you. And I think the Senate ought to require the same kind of honesty in Senate bids and in governmental contracts that we need in our own homes and in our own budgets and in our own financing. I'm concerned about the extravagance in that building, and as soon as I get to Washington, I'm going to urge that the luxuries be eliminated, and if the building is framed, fine, but you don't need to finish it with yet another gym and yet another dining room and yet another extravagance just for the comfort and care and feeding of the United States senators.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of you have a question? No, huh? You do. Yes, I know. Would you stand, please?
I understand that you feel that Senator Baker has not represented small business very well in Washington. How do you feel small business can be better represented?
Well, I think we need tax cuts and tax breaks that are meaningful for small businessmen. I think they need to have someone who is listening to their concerns. We have so many rules and regulations for small businessmen that are just causing them to hire a whole staff of people just to fill out federal forms. That's unfair, and it's cutting into their profits and their ability to function economically. I've run into so many people who are concerned, who are considering selling their small businesses just because they can't afford all the stenographic help they need just to deal with the federal forms.
Okay. Let me go on over here. Did you want to ask something, dear? No. Let me go on over here for just one of these ladies. I'm not going to say which one. Wanted to know if you do your own grocery shopping.
Yes, I do. Haven't been to the grocery much, but that's only in the past couple of weeks, but that tells you more about where we're eating and when we're eating. We're sort of grabbing sandwiches at midnight as we get back from the campaign trail. Has nothing to do with anything else, but I have been to the grocery, and I went, I guess, over the weekend, needed some things for the house, and I had forgotten, really had forgotten how bad it really was. I went to buy a light bulb, and it was over $1 for a light bulb, and I thought, my goodness, you know, the spiraling cost of energy is exemplified just in the cost of this single light bulb, and it just, well, I didn't blow the light bulb, but it blew my mind. It really was terrible.
Do you have a question? No? How about right here? You don't? Any of you ladies? Yes, you do, dear. Would you stand up, please?
I'd like to know Ms. Eskind's views on a disabled person when you're retired disabled at an early age drawing Social Security.
Can you be more specific? I'm not sure.
Well, I was retired from the telephone company and disabled with rheumatoid arthritis and unable to draw Social Security. So this is what I feel like that I'd like to know your views on the person.
You can't draw Social Security?
I cannot after paying it 25 years.
Until 62, is that it?
That's right.
There seems to be a tremendous inequity in that. If you are unable to work because you're disabled but unable to draw disability insurance, even so, I would like to talk to you about that after the show or after the campaign and see what we can do about it. I think that seems incredibly unfair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We better wrap this up, Jane. Let me ask you, in the two campaigns, the senatorial campaign and the race for governor, seem to be separated this time as opposed to other races. Are you running side by side with, philosophically with, Jake Butcher?
You know, it's a question that we get asked frequently. I need to campaign in one area because of the people I need to talk to. His campaign strategy is a little bit different, but as far as whether or not the Democratic Party is unified, be assured that we are unified. We are campaigning together where it's feasible and where it works out with our schedule, and where it doesn't, we need to speak to different groups at different times for different reasons, and it's just a question of what's best for both of us.
I thank you for being here.
Petty, thank you so much. It was fun.
And good
Enjoyed
luck
it.
to you. Miss
Thank
Jane
you.
Eskind, who is a candidate for Senate on the Democratic side on November the 7th. We'll take a break and be right back.
When Stan the Sandwich Man makes his own roast beef sandwich, I use honey grain. Because honey grain is baked with 7 nutritious whole grains: rye, wheat, soya, barley, rice, oats, and corn. Plus
as far as politics are concerned, to Democrats, not to Republicans.
Senator Baker, you're right, of course. Presidential popularity undulates. But I'd like to ask you both something, try a proposition on you, and you tell me what's wrong with it, if anything. And that is that President Carter may have come to office an amateur, not really knowing the territory, and made a lot of mistakes the first 18 months. But that in the last several weeks, a growing maturity on his part and the part of the administration has been demonstrated, not only in the peace talks in the Middle East, but in dealing with Congress, in dealing with the problems of the country. And that from here on out, you may have an 800-pound gorilla politically down there who is not going to be beatable in 1980. And what's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, I think it's not only good for the country and good for Jimmy Carter, but it's good for Republicans, too, because it means that you're going to have a straightforward confrontation on the issues and less talk about ineptitude and bumbling and fumbling.
So ineptitude
right.
is past as an issue?
Jimmy Carter is much better at his job now. President Carter is thoroughly presidential at this point. He was not a year ago, and it'll make a different political arrangement. But I think the issues are on our side, and I'm willing to accept the challenge on that basis. I think the question of a tax cut, expenditure reduction, of the national security of this country, the intrusiveness of government into our lives, the roaring flames of inflation, I think all of these things must be tested in the crucible of debate between Republicans and Democrats in 78 and 80, and I think we'll be better off to do that with a more competent president.
Mr. Rhodes, let me ask you to respond to that, but throw in another factor. The president this coming week is expected to announce a system of voluntary wage and price guidelines with some mechanism for reporting and jawboning in an attempt to get hold of inflation. You think he'll be successful in that? Will that work, and will that add to or detract from this feeling that he is no longer an inept bumbler?
And will Republicans support those guidelines?
Well, of course, we haven't seen them yet. We haven't been briefed on them. We don't know what they will be. I'm told by Mr. Strauss that they will not require any legislation, that the president already has legislative authority to do what he plans to do, which indicates to me that it's not really very much. And I will have to, we certainly will give him every chance in the world to be successful. If he is, why, we will praise him. If he's not, we will try to show him wherein he came a cropper.
Would you agree with Senator Baker that he, let me just ask
Please.
Mr. Rhodes, that Mr. Carter has crossed this personal Rubicon of being able to handle the presidency?
I doubt that it will persist. It does seem to me that he's had a couple of very good months, but we've all been wondering when this would happen. We've seen the Carter administration, and you used the word ineptitude, and it certainly has been guilty of ineptitude as far as its handling of the Congress is concerned. When you look at the fact that the Congress is made up 2-to-1 members of his party, you wonder why really it took them so long, and you wonder if they haven't been pretty slow learners.
Let me mention some other political figures. You say the Republicans are outnumbered 2-to-1 in Congress. You're also badly outnumbered 3-to-1, better than 3-to-1 among governors. And you control only 1 or 2 state houses in all of the country. Adding all of this together, and would you each agree, unless you improve this picture quite dramatically in this November's elections, you're going to be very hard put to build a launching pad to regain the White House in 1980? Senator Baker, you're one of those who was eyeing the White House.
No, I'm eyeing November 7th, 1978, but it's a good point. It really is a good point, Bob, and the real question that you're presenting, without quite saying, is whether or not the Republican Party is still a viable, functioning political entity. And I think the answer is yes, it is, but maybe just barely. I think if we lose much ground, I think if we go much below the numbers we have now, it will call into serious question our effectiveness as a political entity. So I think it's terribly important that we at least hang on to what we've got in 78 and improve it a little. Now, because of the numbers that I mentioned, that is, there are far more Republicans up for re-election in the Senate than there are Democrats, 80 will be the big challenge, not necessarily 78. But you're dead right. We have to build on 78. And if we're to keep a two-party system in this country, 2 functional, effective political units, broad-based and national, then we've got to do well in this election. I happen to think that there's a political paradox at work. We revere the 2-party system. It's really a 3-party system. I know that we're a minority party, but I sometimes think the Democrats don't know they're a minority party, too. And more people are independent in this country than are either Republican or
Congressman
Democrat.
Rhodes, you have led a personal crusade in the last year or two to broaden the base of the Republican Party, to attract more blacks and independents and blue-collar workers. Wouldn't you agree, in the light of the current statistics from the pollsters, that that crusade has been pretty much of a disaster?
No, it hasn't been a disaster, but it started from ground zero, and anywhere it goes is going to be up. I think we are making progress in broadening the base of the party. Bill Brock, the chairman, has made this a real crusade of his. He wants to start rebuilding the party from the ground up to elect state legislatures and more governors, and I agree with him. I think this is where the party began to decay. It's where we have to begin to build back up, and I think we will.
One quick question to Senator Baker. We've gotten some glowing words about prospects in the November elections from Congressman Rhodes. Are you going to pick up any seats in the Senate, a net gain or a net loss?
Mr. Clark, I hope that we gain 1 or 2. I think that's all we can realistically
your
hope
best
for.
prediction.
I'd like to see Republicans at 40 in the Senate. We're now at 38.
I'm sorry, we are out of time. Thank you both very much for being our guests on Issues and Answers.
Bengals return to Walnut Grove, but find their town deserted. The special 90-minute Little House on the Prairie, Monday. Billy Crystal's an angel sent to save Las Vegas, but his human feelings get in the way.
Why don't we go on up to my suite and get a little more comfortable?
Human Feelings, Monday.
This is a test.
Hey!
Sir, try this new beer.
Oh, sure. You can really sink your teeth into it.
Sir, those are the pretzels. Here's the beer.
That's good. What is it?
Stroh Light, a new kind of light beer.
Light beer? Sure fooled me.
Well, Stroh Light has fewer calories, but it's specially brewed to give you a real beer taste.
Hey, that's great beer. Can I have some more?
Sure.
But now I can't find my mouth.
The folks at Mike Nacarato's GMC are showcasing their new GMC trucks all week long at Truckorama 79. 250 brand spanking new GMCs. Everything from vans and pickups to light and heavy duties, and all priced to sell.
Just look at these beauties. Come on out and let Mike Nacarato and the guys find the truck for you during the fabulous Truckorama 79.
Never before, Nashville, has there been a sale like Mike Nacarato's GMC.
Senator Howard Baker said in Memphis today that his opponent has been given bum information on the Tellico Dam issue and should clam down a little for the rest of the campaign. But here in Nashville, Democratic candidate Jane Eskind continued saying that Baker is lying when he says an amendment he sponsored will save the dam, and all indications are that her campaign will get more aggressive. Samuetta Primus has more.
Today, Jane Eskind began taping a series of media spots to run during the last 2 weeks of her campaign. Well known to Democratic leaders, but not to the Democratic masses, name identification was at first a primary concern. And while exploring the issues of growing food prices and hospital costs, one aide said they wanted the people to get the feeling their candidate cares. But another issue has been her opponent, Howard Baker. And today, during an interview on Teddy Bart's Noon Show, she was asked if Baker was the only real issue.